Thank you guys all for joining our March meeting with Wild Ones Greater Cleveland. We're very excited to have you. So our little icebreaker today that we ask is that you introduce yourself and share some of your signs of spring. So where you're from, what signs of springs have you seen, and what is your favorite spring native plant, tree, or shrub? Who would like to start? All right, so since people are being shy, my name is Jessica Allisnamer. I'm the Wild Ones Greater Cleveland president. And what signs of springs you have seen, or I've seen, you can see on the photos here. This is a pussy willow shrub on the left-hand side from my yard. I'm very excited. It's one of my favorite plants to see spring up first. I don't see the pollen on it yet, but I'm sure that is coming. And here is, for those that are not aware, this is a great time of year. There's a lot of activity within the wetlands and what I call the great salamander crossing that occurs in the metro parks from one part of the wetlands to another, or vernal pools, I should say. And here are just a few of the photos that I took. A frog, and I'm not sure which type that might of salamander that is. But I have a few other photos that I will be sharing, and it just so happens to coincide a little bit with our educational topic today. Let's see somebody else. Oh, I hope you feel better, Margaret. All right. All right. So who else would love to share some of their signs for spring?
This is Lisa. I can share. I live on the west side of Cleveland in West Park. Um, for signs of spring, I actually have seen my nine bark shrub starting to grow little tiny leaves. So that's exciting. I just planted that last year in my front yard.
Nice.
So that's exciting to see it come back. I'm not sure what my favorite spring flower for the natives is. I'm still learning about the native plants, and I don't know that I have one yet, but I'm sure I will soon.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. Who else would like to share? Oh, Christine, you're on mute.
I'm Chris from Chagrin Falls, and I heard all the wood frogs. They sound like a bunch of ducks at the West Woods. And my first four milk jugs are coming up, little seedlings. So
Ooh,
pretty
I'm
excited about
jealous.
that.
All right. Who else?
I can go. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my computer, why it's so zoomed in on my face. I like can't fix it. So, uh, but my name's Elise. I live in North Ridgeville. And I planted a lot of things last fall, and I've been kind of like digging to see if they're starting to come up. And I do have some wood poppies that just a little bit of green is starting to come up. So I'm just waiting for them to like fully emerge.
Oh yeah, and yeah, some of them are just like so itty bitty. I think I even saw like the smallest little, I think it might have been my Christmas fern because I planted them last year and it was questionable if they were going to survive. Even so, in theory, they're supposed to survive throughout, the winter. But I actually saw the first little sprig come up, so I'm very excited. Who else would like to share?
This is Marty. I'll go next. My favorite spring plant is actually my wild ramps. I have them on my property, and I just really look forward to them. I probably have another 10 days before they emerge.
Oh,
Although if we get some warm weather over the weekend, I'll go out and find it. It's a little bit of a hike, so from my house. But anyway, I guess I'm supposed to say where I'm from or where I live. I actually live in Milan, Ohio, which is just in southern Erie County and north of Norwalk. It's also the birthplace of Thomas Edison. Um,
cool.
what signs of spring have I seen? All my non-natives are coming up, my daffodils, things like that. So,
Hey, that's a sign of spring.
yeah.
Who else would like to share?
I'll go next. I'm Nikki Amelli. I'm from Moreland Hills. Um, I went to watch the salamander migration a couple weeks ago with my family, so I got to see some of those guys too. It was wonderful. Um, and I love hiking in the spring along the towpath and finding the skunk cabbage. I don't have any in my yard, but I always know that winter's on its way out and spring is on its way in when I see the skunk cabbage. And like Christine, I did plant, it sounds like she did some winter sowing as well. And I have about 20, 25 milk jugs on my deck, but the wind blew a whole bunch of them over this weekend. So fingers crossed that the things that were starting to sprout are still okay.
Most likely, especially since the milk jugs are usually still sealed at that stage. Like if it was afterwards, that might be a little rough if like the dirt and everything tipped out. But yeah, no, that's exciting. And 20 jugs. Oh my goodness, I'm so jealous. I limited myself to 4 this year, and I really want to do more for to start growing for the chapter, but I didn't get quite around to it. So,
I
but very
wanted to
excited to
share the
see
love
those.
this year, so
Yeah, sprout. Awesome. Thank you, Nikki.
yeah.
Who else would like to share?
I'll go. This is Kathy. I live in Shaker Heights, and I've seen the bloodroot and the mayapple heads coming up out of the ground, and that's always the first ones I like to see.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thank you. Who else would like to share?
I can share if you want. So, my name's Carrie, and I'm from Akron. And the signs of spring we have. I saw somebody else mention their
Oh,
fall
Carrie,
tree.
you're not. We can't hear you. Sorry. I'm
Oh,
just glad I saw your face moving.
can you hear me now?
Soft. It's soft. Is it soft for everyone else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I can sit closer. Can you hear me better now?
Barely.
No? Okay.
We can hear you, but like I said, barely. It's funny because yours was working just fine earlier.
Yeah.
We might have to come back to you because it's important that we can hear you. Because Carrie is our speaker today. Who else would like to share their signs of spring? Anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right, let's move on. All right, so next, for those of you not familiar with Wild Ones, Wild Ones is a national volunteer nonprofit organization that promotes the importance of native plants and restoring the ecosystem. And we are the local chapter of Greater Cleveland, and we cover all of Northeast Ohio, doing a wide variety of free events and activities open to public, such as this virtual education topic that we'll be covering today, as well as many others. So I think several of you have heard that we did several winter sowing events throughout the winter. We have several spring ephemeral walks coming up, as well as virtual events like this. There's even a national one tomorrow, but we'll cover that. So please definitely check out some of our upcoming events and activities. We're a very active group. Next, moving on. So we'll be talking about some of our chapter updates, announcements, upcoming events and activities. And of course, we'll be covering our educational topic, Once Upon a Wetland with Frog Watch USA. So first, we have 9 new chapter members since our January meeting, or sorry, I should say February meeting. And we are now at a total of 206 members. And just a special thank you for anybody that is a member, both new and old. It by being a member, it helps keep our events and activities free and open to the public. So just a little special call out there. But for those, if anybody's on the call here, who's new is Karen Redman. I apologize, I'm going to probably mispronounce a few names. Cicely Bronson, Sue Gifford, Kara Varner, Scott Benvelberg, Valkenberg. Oh, wow, I can't speak. Jeff Duscher, Dory Olivas, Dan Palmer, Christine Gullias. So I apologize for any mispronunciations, but if you should see them, please welcome them. Next, moving on, some volunteer opportunities. So we're volunteer powered. So whether you're able to volunteer for 1 hour or multiple hours, anything is appreciated. But specifically, some roles that we are looking to fulfill within our chapter is a newsletter chair. We are also looking for a chapter operations assistant. We are also looking for somebody to help with our social media and an assistant volunteer coordinator. And just to clarify what we mean by assistant volunteer coordinator, we do a lot of tabling events. When I say tabling events, it's really about creating that community awareness around the importance of native plants. And this is just talking with people at certain environmental related events and activities, and just sharing your passion for native plants and the mission, and just, just sharing that enthusiasm with people. So, and that person helps coordinate these events. And so we have volunteers at them to talk about the topic. So also, we are looking for a garden tour program chair. Every year, we do an annual native plant walk. Each county does it a little bit different time, but it happens usually in July or August. And it's usually for 1 or 2 days on certain weekends, depending on the county. And we just love seeing people's examples of native plant gardens. Some of them are quite extensive and gorgeous. We usually have a few prairie tours or a few things along those lines as well. So if that interests you, please let us know. We are also looking for Keystone Workshop educators. So our Keystone Workshop series is a core series of education topics such as the importance of native plants, winter sowing, things along those lines. And you don't have to be familiar with it. You just got to be willing to learn and help us lead some of these educational topics when we do them with the metro parks or things like that, or even if you just want to be assistant to help out. These are really fun events and activities. I think my favorite is winter sowing. Sad to see it go, but you will see things like invasive species removal, Keystone education our workshops, as well as a few other things later in the year. So more to come. And if you're interested in volunteering and it's not something you heard about, there's many other ways to opportunities to volunteer. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Just send us an email at wildonesgreatercleveland@gmail.com, just saying, hey, I'm interested in volunteering, but not sure, what I'd be interested in. And we're happy to sit down and have a conversation with you. Because like I said, every little bit of volunteer hours helps us in some way, and we very much appreciate your efforts. Next, some recent events that we've had in the last month is we had a virtual in-depth iNaturalist training with Ray Stewart. And for anybody that missed that, that is available on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and check that out. And also we had a few native seed and packing social events, both in Cuyahoga County and Summit County. This is one of our summer, oh, sorry, I should say summer, winter events that we tend to do. For those who not aware, we give out native seeds at all of our events and activities, even when we table and do community awareness events and whatnot. And so by helping involving these volunteers helping pack, it just really helps us provide those free seeds to everyone throughout the year. So much appreciated if anybody did volunteer with that. Next, some of our upcoming events. So this next event here is tomorrow. It'll be virtual and it's going to be hosted by Wild Ones at National. And it's going to be Rethinking Horticulture with Real Ecology, presented by Joey Santor. So be sure to check that out. You could go to the Wild Ones National website or social media. You can also see the registration address there, but check that out. Next, we have several spring ephemeral walks. There's a few that we're still finalizing dates and times on, But as you can see here, we have the Portage Park District one on April 18th. And we also have with Summit Metro Parks on April 25th at 1 p.m. I can tell you that we will have additional spring ephemeral walks in April in Lorain County, at least 2 in Cuyahoga County. Obviously, we already talked about Summit and Portage, as well as Medina. We will also be offering a spring ephemeral community science project in April with Ray Stewart. So more to come. So this, for those of you that may have missed our iNaturalist trainings and you want to participate in activities such as this, feel free to check out our YouTube channel. We have the brief version. We also have a more in-depth version in case you might want to participate in those community science projects. And of course, towards the end of April, we have several Earth Day events as well as Arbor Day events that the community hosts, and we'll be at several of them. But we hope that you do participate. Next, so we are on TV now, guys. So Mary Lou, I'm not sure if she's online, but we're very excited to share. She's our production broadcast chair. We have a partnership with Brunswick Area Television, and they are now airing an episode that Mary Lou, with the help of Diab, recorded with regards to winter sowing. So I know it's a little bit late in the season now, but this is still okay to plant, especially germination A seeds. So check that out if you haven't winter sowed before. It's it's a nice little video. And also I saw a sneak peek. They will have spring ephemerals as the next topic with Ray Stewart. And that should probably be published, I'd say, in the next week. So you can check out Brunswick Area Television, but also once it's published, it'll also be available on our YouTube channel as well. So check out those videos. The spring ephemeral one is a really good, I'd say it's a good 40 minutes or so. And really what goes through a lot of cool native spring ephemerals for Northeast Ohio with some lovely photos from Ray. And for those of you mentioned that, I think skunk cabbage, that is on that list. So please check that out. All right, so without further ado, our education topic is Frog Watch USA, and Carrie Bassett has been kind enough to join us. Carrie is with Akron Zoo Education Mission Manager and is the National Frog Watch USA Coordinator. So in case you guys weren't aware, it's right in our backyard. So Carrie, are we good with are you able to, you want to say something?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
You can hear me? Good. Okay.
Okay, wonderful.
All right.
So I'm going to stop sharing, Carrie, and I'm going to pass it on to you.
All right, everybody. So hopefully everybody can hear me good. Welcome. She was saying, my name is Carrie. I work at the Akron Zoo, and I am the National Frog Watch USA Coordinator. So wanted to talk to you guys tonight about Once Upon a Wetland to fit your fairy tale storybook theming that you all are doing for this year's theming. So we're going to talk all about Frog Watch. So, to start off, Frog Watch is a program. It's a community science program, which we'll talk about, that takes place in wetlands. So the wetlands are where we need to go to talk about Frog Watch. So we're going to start our little journey there. So when we're talking about wetlands, what are they? Like, how would you define a wetland, or how would you talk about a wetland? So wetlands are basically a place where we do collect our Frog Watch data. And because the frogs and toads need to be near the water for their breeding, and then that's where they go to advertise. So the boys are advertising to the girls. So they need to be near those wetlands in order to lay their eggs and to have their babies and all of that good stuff, which is why we had mentioned earlier the whole like salamander migration and all of that. That takes place because the salamanders and the frogs are actually heading over to the wetlands for their breeding for the spring. So for Frog Watch's purposes, wetlands are basically defined by three different characteristics. So if you're out looking for a wetland, if you find these three things, that tells you that you are in a wetland. So the first of those things is the presence of plants that are known to grow in saturated conditions. So that sounds like a mouthful, but you guys are plant people, it sounds like. So if you think about plants that you know that grow where it's wet, think about cattails, think about willows, reeds, sedges. You're looking for those kinds of plants, the things that are growing right there on the edge of the water. So you're looking for those plants. Unfortunately now too with Phragmites, it's an invasive species. It's not a species we want to see, but it is one that you do also find around wetlands, and it's pretty identifiable with its big fluffy ends and all of that. So that's another plant that would unfortunately help to identify wetlands in Ohio at this point. You're also looking for places where the soils lack oxygen. So none of us are going out with any kind of oxygen meters or checking the soil or anything. But a really easy way to test if your soils lack oxygen is unfortunately to step in them. Because when you do, the bacteria that live in that soil are anaerobic, meaning they don't breathe oxygen because there isn't any in that soil. And bacteria and things that don't breathe oxygen don't breathe out carbon dioxide. Instead, they actually breathe out sulfur. So if you step in a wetland and you pull your foot out, chances are you're going to smell like rotten eggs for a little bit. So that is a really easy way to tell if you're at a soil that lacks oxygen. Also, stepping in it is going to make your foot all wet, which also tells you that there's no oxygen in that soil because it's filled up with water. And then the last kind of rule of a wetland is that there's water at or near the surface during some part of the growing season. So usually you can see it in your wetland, especially things like swamps and vernal pools and even ponds and things like that. You're going to see the water right there at or near the surface of the soil during the growing season. So those are kind of the rules you go by of where we do frog watch, because we are looking for those wetland spaces. Now, what is Frog Watch? So I don't know how many of you all are familiar with it, but it is a really cool program. It is ran by the Akron Zoo at this point. So the Akron Zoo took over Frog Watch in 2022. So we've had kind of ownership of Frog Watch since then. But Frog Watch itself actually, yay, Bryce loves Frog Watch. I like hearing that. The program itself actually began in 1998. So Frog Watch is, I gotta do the math. So 28 years old this year. So it's been around for a while, been collecting data on the frog and toad breeding calls. So basically the princes are calling to the princesses if we're talking about stories and fairy tales and all that. So it's a really cool program where it's hosted by local chapters all across the United States. We have about 140 some chapters that are found across the United States, which is super exciting. We have a bunch here in Ohio, so if you're interested in joining, we can definitely hook you up with a chapter. But basically, as I said, you go to the wetlands and you're collecting data on the breeding calls of the frogs and toads. And I promise you don't have to kiss any frogs to do this program. So, there we go. It is a really good example of a community science program. So it is a program that's been running for a while, and it is a strong community science program. And if you're not familiar with those, community science are really neat programs where you basically kind of do a research collaboration that takes place between scientists and volunteers. So if you think about it, there's a limited number of scientists out there in the world. And they can only do so much research in the time that they're researching whatever it is they're researching. So the idea behind community science is we train everyday people on how to collect the data that the scientists are looking for, and then we turn the data that the volunteers collect over to the scientists. So we end up being able to collect way more information than what a single scientist can collect in their lifetime. So it really expands opportunities out there for the data collection, and it also provides scientific information to community members. So one of the cool things with FrogWatch is that we have free and open source data. So once our data is put into our online database, anybody can access it and anybody can look at it and run visualizations on our data, which allows them to make bar graphs and chart things of what frogs are calling where and what time of year and how much. So it's a really cool program. So we don't hold on to the data and hide it from anybody. We want everybody to be able to access it. And it's also, community science is really good for really large scale or long-term data collection. So it's a good program for that. If you think about it, FrogWatch has been around, for 28 years. I said the Audubon Christmas bird count has been around for over 100. So think about all the data that's been collected there. So I see somebody has their hand raised. So if somebody has a question, I would say feel free to jump in.
So we have a question from the group.
Yeah.
Lucas was asking, can I do it in my neighborhood ponds?
Absolutely. Yes. So we encourage people to do their data collection wherever is convenient to them. So we have some people that volunteer for parks and they do it at their local parks. We have some volunteers that help me at the zoo because we have a few spots at our zoo that we do. But I have a lot of people that do it in their local neighborhoods or even in their own backyards if they're lucky enough to have pools or ponds or things like that in their backyard. So absolutely, we encourage you to go wherever is convenient to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what are some of the benefits of data? Like, why are we out there doing this? One of the things is it does help us to describe local species diversity. So it tells us what species are living where. Can't do anything if you don't know where the frogs are. It does help to detect rare and invasive species. So luckily here in Ohio, we don't have any invasive frogs because, winter. And so we don't have to worry about that. But there are frogs that are invasive in other parts of the country. I know out west, they're actually having a huge problem with bullfrogs. So the bullfrogs have gotten introduced into their habitats. And we'll talk about bullfrogs later because they're a native to us. So we're happy and excited when we see them. But out there, they're big carnivorous frogs that are eating everything in sight. So they've become an invasive species like in Colorado and other places out west. So FrogWatch helps detect when the invasive ones are calling too. It tells us if there's shift in the diversity, like say maybe this wetland used to host, I don't know, wood frogs, and now we're seeing leopard frogs. That probably wouldn't happen, but it tells us if this diversity is changing, tells us if the range of the frogs is changing, changes in their phenology, like their life cycle over time. Most importantly, frogs and toads are a really good indicator of wetland health. If a wetland is unhealthy, we don't have frogs and toads. So if we start noticing something happening to the frogs and toads, then that tells us there's something going on with our wetland. And we'll kind of talk about why that is in a little bit. And eventually the data could, especially for a lot of the park systems that work with the data from FrogWatch, it could inform the development of our land management strategy. So I know there are some parks that use it to see if their wetlands that they have are healthy or if they need to help them, or if maybe this wetland is worth protecting as maybe some of the other wetlands. So they know they need to put something into the park for people or whatever. Maybe, this wetland's not as healthy, so maybe they'll put something over top of that one rather than doing anything to any other wetlands that are in the area. So it can really help development of land management. So all those good things come out of the data that we're collecting with FrogWatch. So our monitoring protocol, this is kind of just the real quick nuts and bolts of what we're looking for scientifically when we do this. And I promise here soon, we're going to start talking about the best part of the project, which are the frogs. So, but our monitoring protocol, we do ask that people do their observations at least once a month. And it does typically take place February through August. This month, in February, I think we got like 1 or 2 days that were warm enough that some of our people got out. but a lot of times February is kind of missed here in Ohio. But since this is a national program, there are a lot of chapters that have good data coming in February. Our observations do take place at night. So I see a little typo on my slide. So observations happen no earlier than 30 minutes after sunset. So we have to, unfortunately, if you're not a night person, but we do have to go out when the frogs are awake and doing their thing. So our observations happen no earlier than 30 minutes after sunset. Once you get to your site, we have a 2-minute acclimation period because humans make a lot of noise. We can't go anywhere without making noise. So once people get to their site, we have them sit still and quiet for 2 minutes. That way the frogs get used to you. They realize you're not there to eat them. It's like a whole thing. So you sit there for 2 minutes and let the frogs acclimate to you. And then after that 2 minutes, now our observation starts. And we set a timer and we listen for 3 minutes. So we're listening for the frogs and toads for exactly 3 minutes. And then during that time, you're going to identify them by the calls. It's called Frog Watch, but it should really be Frog Listen because we're listening to the frogs and toads. We're not actually catching them and identifying them. But we listen to them and identify them by their call. And we write down the ones we hear during that 3-minute period. If our session is interrupted, then we restart, including the acclimation period. Just, in case if the frogs get scared by something, we want to restart so that we get a better observation being done. We record the call intensity, kind of how many-ish frogs we're hearing calling at one time. We have it on a scale, so you kind of pick the number off the scale that works for you. And then we record all the different weather variations that are happening. And the sites are registered with a bunch of information about the wetland sites. So all of that is then entered into an online database so we can track what frogs and toads are calling at what intensity based on various weather variables in different types of wetlands at different times a year. So there's a lot of data being collected in just that 3-minute little observation period. So we do say, frogs are kind of particular. They're kind of like a little Goldilocks where they do want perfect weather to be out, which makes it way more palatable for us, fortunately. So we don't go out if the wind is more than 12 miles per hour and the temperature has to be at least 35 degrees or higher because the frogs are picky and they don't typically call if the wind is higher than that or the temperature is too cold because, cold-blooded, all of that. So those are a real quick monitoring protocol. That's what we would be asking people if you are going to be involved with Frog Watch, what we would be asking you to do. So let's get to the favorite part of the talk. Let's talk about our frogs and toads. So there are some differences. Technically, all toads are frogs, but not all frogs are toads. So it's kind of like the fingers thumb analogy. All thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. So all toads are frogs, not all frogs are toads. But there's a little bit of scientific differentiation for most people when you're talking about frogs versus toads. So, like I said, these are science-y rules. So sometimes they're not 100%. But in general, this is kind of how you differentiate between the two. So frogs typically are going to be more aquatic. They're going to live in or near the water. They're typically going to have smooth and probably slimy skin because, they're hanging out in the water. Typically, frogs do lay their eggs in clusters. So if you look at the bottom picture there by Doug Markham, he actually works at the National Park here in Ohio, the Cuyahoga Valley. So a lot of our pictures actually come from people that submit them to me from Ohio, from our chapters and stuff, which is pretty exciting. But if you look at all the little black dots in the water around those are wood frogs, around all those wood frogs, you can see the clusters of black dots. Those are their eggs. So frogs lay their eggs in big, massive clumps. Okay. Kind of looks like chia seeds. It's kind of what it reminds me of. Frogs typically have skinny bodies with long legs. Think of swimmers. Long, tall, skinny, think Michael Phelps, Olympic swimmers, Katie Ledecky. So long, skinny bodies, long limbs, meant for swimming. Frogs typically, because of their long limbs and their strength, move in big leaps and jumps. So they're the ones that if you go to catch them on the bank of the pond, they are going to just jump out of your hands and you're never going to see them again. Now, one of the things that's kind of cool is frogs actually have teeth, and I say that with quotes around it. So frogs have sort of like a teeth situation in their upper jaw. It's more like bony plates with some rasping surface on it. And if you think about it, they're going to be trying to catch things that are swimming in the water. So they want something that's going to grab a hold of that food and hold it in place until they can swallow it. So teeth is kind of a misnomer. It's kind of more like these rasping plates that they've got that allow them to grab their food. So that's frogs. On the other hand, toads are, think of like, we usually compare them more to like Olympic wrestlers. So like wrestling guys and girls, I guess. So they're a little bit stouter. They have little short, heavier, fat bodies with little short legs because they're meant to stay down near the ground more. Toads typically have warty or dry skin because they're the ones that live under your bushes, in your garden, that kind of place. When they do lay their eggs, if you look in the bottom picture there, you can see those white strings of pearls coming out of the toads. Toads lay their eggs in strings. So it's really cool. It kind of looks like a string of pearls. Or I think sometimes once the outside starts developing around them, they get like they're in a packet. So it kind of reminds me of like rope lighting where you've got the tube with the lights inside of it. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Typically, toads are going to be on dry land. I mean, they go into the water to breed, but they don't really like hang out there. They move in little short hops, much easier to catch. Do not recommend letting your pets catch them though, because toads are toxic. And toads don't really have teeth because they're not trying to grasp things in the water. They're just catching the bugs that are in your garden. So that's kind of our real quick and dirty how to tell a frog from a toad. But there's always animals that break the rules. And we actually have one we'll be talking about here in a little bit. So the reason Frog Watch exists, though, is because frogs and toads are super important. You guys, I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but frogs and toads are really important. So basically, they do benefit the natural world and humans. They benefit all of us. So a lot of people will recognize, okay, yeah, I understand frogs and toads are predators and prey. So they're kind of that important middle section of like the food web, because they're not apex predators. They're not, they're eaten by other things. They're not just prey though, because most frogs are carnivores. So they are kind of right there in the middle. And if you pull them out of the food web, everything kind of collapses. So they are very, very important to the ecosystem. I love that frogs and toads eat mosquitoes. So, and other kinds of insects that maybe might not be so friendly to us as humans. So they do work really, really well as pest control. They're also food. In a lot of places, frogs and toads do function as food. And so, frog legs and all of that, especially out west, I know with the invasive bullfrogs, I know they've been doing a lot of capturing with them and turning them into food because they're otherwise messing up the whole ecosystem out there. Frogs and toads are really important to medicine. There's been studies on bufotoxins, which is the toxins that I mentioned that toads have, studying them for things for, maybe blood pressure or coagulation issues, clotting issues. There's actually a frog that we'll talk about here in a little bit that is being studied for organ transplant purposes. Education and research. Frogs are super important for that. Everybody loves frogs, so people like to talk about them educationally. Research, they are used for different kinds of research and things. As I mentioned, medical research is a big one that they're looking at right now. And they're culturally significant. I mean, A, everybody loves frogs and toads, but B, everybody always is like, oh, okay, I get it. Indigenous people have lots of stories about frogs and toads, and they do. There are all kinds of lovely stories that Indigenous people have told about frogs and toads. But you guys are also very familiar with another famous frog. He is on every screen for children. He's green, and he sings about being green. And his name's Kermit. So
Mhm.
Kermit is very culturally significant to us. So, and there are lots of other frogs and toads. I know Frog and Toad, the books, are making a cultural like comeback too. I've been seeing a lot more about them. So they are culturally significant to us. But then, as I mentioned, they also serve as indicators of environmental health. So they're really important to us because they are so sensitive to what is going on in the environment around them. And that's because of two different things. One, frogs and toads have something called permeable skin, which means that anything touches them gets absorbed into their bodies. So if there's toxins in the wetlands, the frogs and toads are going to absorb that into their skin, and then it's going to start showing up in them, whether it shows up in, unfortunately, deformities, or maybe even the frogs and toads not surviving whatever has been put into the wetlands. So that really, I love the Kermit images in the chat. Thanks, guys. um, so that really affects them. And the other part of it is because they also have a life cycle that has them living on both land and in the water. They're amphibians. Amphibios means double life. So they live on land and in the water. So if there's anything going on in either location of the wetland, the frogs and toads pick it up, and they're the first ones to tell us that something is going on. So they're super important. If you see frogs and toads, that tells you there's probably a pretty good area that you're in. So I'm going to depress you a little bit, unfortunately, because amphibians are hurting. They're not doing well around the world. Over the past 20 years, it's probably actually the past 30 years at this point, scientists have reported dramatic declines in amphibian populations, not just frogs and toads, but amphibians as a whole. It is believed that amphibians are the most endangered vertebrate class around the world. So the IUCN is an organization that puts out like a red list every year. So the animals that are threatened, endangered, or extinct in the wild, the IUCN is the organization that reports that. And they just completed a few years ago their second global amphibian assessment. They assessed a little over 8,000 amphibians with that. And through that, they found out that 41% of them are threatened with extinction. That's a scary number. 222 amphibians are believed to have gone extinct. 11% are data deficient. That's 900 frogs and toads and other amphibians that we just don't know enough about to know if there's something going on with them. It could be maybe we have one specimen, we could have a picture, we could have a recording of a call, but we don't know enough about them to say whether their numbers are improving or declining. And that's scary. And that's hopefully places where things like Frog Watch can help. But the data deficient number has gone down. It's almost cut in half since the first assessment. So this assessment got out there and it found the amphibians, which is really, really cool. And at least a third of all amphibian species are declining in population. In the United States, there are 43 amphibians listed as critically endangered, or vulnerable. We have one species of concern in the state of Ohio when it comes to frogs and toads. I think we might have a couple more when you start throwing in salamanders. So yeah, some really sad numbers there. Some really concerning numbers about our amphibian friends. So why is this happening? So this is a picture I actually took out of that global assessment that was done. And the biggest thing threatening our amphibian guys is habitat loss. So whether that is deforestation, agricultural expansion, infrastructure, the building of buildings, energy production, pollution, making it so they can't live there, or even fragmentation, where we kind of will drop roads and things in the middle of decent habitat. It takes a lot for little frogs and toads to get across a road, and that can be very, very scary. But 93% of the amphibians that numbers are declining, habitat loss is the main reason why. Then going down the board there, climate change is affecting them. When your body temperature is dependent on what the weather is, climate change affects you for sure. So climate change is definitely affecting amphibians. It's also believed to be one of the drivers behind the next thing, which is disease. So chytrid is the famous fungus that is affecting our frogs, and they do think some of it might be because the temperatures are warming, so this fungus is better able to grow. So it is a big deal when dealing with our frogs and toads. And they have been able to heal it in places like zoos, which is amazing. But unfortunately, we can't bring every single frog in to a zoo to heal them and then put them back. But it is treatable, so they are doing lots and lots of research on that. Fire is another thing. Fire is also encouraged and brought on some by climate change. But fires definitely hurt them. It's hard to run out of the way of a fire when you're an inch long. So yeah, it can definitely affect them, as well as the things that we do to treat the fires, some of the chemicals and things that will drop to, stop the fires. Invasive species is affecting 14% of the amphibian population that's declining. So invasive species are a big deal. And then 9% is just the overexploitation, whether they're being kept or being harvested for traditional medicine or they're being collected for the pet trade or things like that. So those are the main threats that are affecting our amphibian friends. Like I said, it's kind of scary, but luckily we can do some things to help. So what are some things that we can do to address these threats? Education engagement, what you are doing right now by listening to me and learning about Frog Watch and learning about the frogs is one of the things you can do to address the threat. The more you learn and share with other people, the more of a difference we can make. Plus, if we don't know enough, if we can't share the knowledge that we have, we can't make a difference. So that education and engagement piece is so important. Even if you just walk away tonight, like Frog Watch is really cool and I learned some cool stuff about frogs and I'm going to share it with my family, that is what we need. We can also address threats with regulations. So maybe we can't write the regulations, but we can look at who we're voting for. They write regulations. We can look at who, if supporting our parks, because they might make some regulations. They definitely deal with the next one of management. So supporting our parks can be a big thing that we can do to help because they're going to try to manage the land that they're on in the best way possible to protect the species that live there. Doing research. Like I said, you can't fix what you don't know about. So if we do research like Frog Watch or monitoring like Frog Watch, that teaches us about what the frogs and toads are really doing out there. And then we can use that knowledge to help them. So those are just some things that we can do to really help address the threats that's facing our frogs and toad friends. So now we're going to kind of focus on our frogs and toads of Ohio. So we have 15 different kinds that are all in 4 different families. So we have Ranidae. Those are our true frogs. Those are the aquatic frogs that we kind of talked about, the ones that most people think about when they hear frogs. You got your Peleobatidae, which are our spadefoots. We have one here in Ohio and not in where we live, unfortunately. We have Hylidae. Those are our tree frogs. So the little guys that scream at you from the trees. And then you've got your Bufonidae, which are your toads. All right. So we're going to kind of start with our true frogs. There are 6 of them in Ohio: the bullfrog, the green frog, the southern and northern leopard frog, the pickerel frog, and the wood frog. Those are our true frogs that we have here in Ohio. And they kind of share some features. They have the powerful hind legs for swimming. They move in the long leaps. They have webbed feet. They have a big stout waist to attach those legs to. The big wide mouth that helps them to gulp down all those yummy fish and bugs that are in the water. And they have very smooth skin without a lot of bumps or things like that on it, usually. So I guess I should have warned you. When I click to these slides, we're going to hear what that animal sounds like. So what you just heard, hopefully you guys heard it. Did everybody hear it okay? Was the sound of the American bullfrog. So they are our largest frogs in North America. They have a white throat. They are voracious. They will literally eat anything that fits in their mouth, including small birds and young snakes. So even their tadpoles are carnivorous and will eat other tadpoles. So they're big frogs, and they're dangerous to the other animals that live in the pond with them. They're very aquatic. They're going to spend most of their time in the water. Their mating season is because they're so big, it takes a while for their bodies to warm up enough to start coming out for mating. So they tend to wake up and start calling around late April, usually even later than that, and they go all the way to the end of the summer because they need it to be warm to warm those big bodies up. They typically are found in ponds, lakes, maybe even streams. They do want vegetation at the side of those areas because that's where they like to hide. And they're usually found, if you're going to find them out of the water, they're going to be at the bank on the water's edge. So I'm going to double check. Did everybody get to hear the bullfrog? Did the sound come through okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that is our bullfrog. Like I said, biggest frog in North America. Now, when it says the size at the top, it says they're 3 to 8 inches. The small side is actually the males. The large size is the females. In frogs, girls are bigger. But if you think about, they have to hold hundreds of eggs in their body. So they need all that space and all that energy and size. The boys, they don't have as much to hold. So they can be smaller, and they're just fine. But typically the large end is going to be your female and the smaller end is going to be the male. And they are measured from nose to the end kind of their rump. So it does not include the length of their back legs. So if you can imagine an 8-inch frog, that's a good sized frog. It's no wonder they're wreaking havoc out west where they are. But we're happy to have them because they're supposed to be in our ecosystem and they're kept in check with the other things that we have here in Ohio. All right, so we're going to move on to our next frog. And if you guys have questions, please feel free to shout them out, throw them in the chat. I like to talk about the frogs. So our next one. So he sounds a little different. So this frog is a lot of time mistaken for the bullfrog. We always kind of compare the bullfrog to like the bellowing of a bull. Some people think the bullfrog sounds like a lightsaber when he starts calling because it's got that vroom kind of sound like a lightsaber. The green frog, though, looks a lot like a bullfrog, lives in the same place as a bullfrog, but sounds different. A green frog is about 2 to 4 inches, so a little bit smaller, but a large female green frog is the same size as a small male bullfrog. And they look similar, except if you look right behind their eye and then running down their back, they have a ridge. It's called a dorsolateral ridge, which is a big fancy word that means they have a ridge on their back that runs down the side. They have two, one behind each eye. Bullfrogs do not have that, and that's how you can visually tell the two apart. The green frog's mating season is early May to mid-July, so around the same time as the bullfrog. And its habitat, it lives close to the shallow water, streams, swamps, and at the edges of ponds and lakes. So very, very similar to the bullfrog, but he sounds different. So people that listen to the green frog thinks he sounds like a banjo string, like plucking on a banjo string. And we all know a famous green-colored frog who plays the banjo. Am I right? So we try to remember that green frogs sound like banjos because they're Kermit. So if you can kind of remember that to help you remember that when you hear that plucking sound, that is a green frog because Kermit the Frog plays the banjo and he's green. All right. Our next little frog is kind of that weird chuckly sound. So southern leopard frogs we actually don't have in this part of Ohio. They are only found in a couple of counties down south, and were only found like 2 or 3 times in the whole time people have been looking for frogs in Ohio. So we don't really worry about this guy too much. I don't typically teach on him, but he is an Ohio frog, just not up here. But he also has that dorsolateral ridge, and his is painted white. So that's how you can identify him. And he's named for the spots on his back that look like a leopard. So he's spotted. He has a very pointy little nose, and there are no spots on his nose. But he does have a white spot in the middle of his tympanic membrane, which is his ear. So if you look at that circle right behind his eye, you can see it kind of it's a little brown circle with a white dot right in the middle of it. That is his ear, and that white spot helps to identify him also as a leopard frog. Their mating season is in March, but there has been no ever recorded mating of this frog in Ohio. Like I said, they're only found in a couple of counties down south, and chances are they might have even swam across the Ohio River and were just one-offs that ended up in the wrong place. Their habitat, they like a wide variety, anywhere from freshwater with lots and lots of plants to even brackish marshes. So like even some marshes that have a little bit of mixture of salt water in them, and even moist fields. So that is the southern leopard frog. Our next frog is one that we have here and is a very close relative. So we'll move on and talk about him. So that's our northern leopard frog, 2 to 5 inches. Also has a dorsolateral ridge that is also white, and named also for his irregular spots that look like a leopard. So you can see all those spots down his back. Mating season mid-March through May. Also likes freshwater with a lot of vegetation, maybe some brackish marshes and moist fields. Like you can find them in the Howe Meadow, I think, in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, because that's a moist field. So they're found more in that type of place. You're not going to find them as much in like ponds and things, or even probably not vernal pools. They're more in marshes and moist fields. They do kind of sound like a snoring, but we also like to think, since I work at the zoo, I know what a leopard sounds like when it's snarling at you, and that is what a northern leopard frog sounds like, is actually kind of like a growling or a snarling cat. So that's kind of how we try to remember what they sound like. All right, another spotted frog is next. All right, so that is our friend the pickerel frog. He's a little bit smaller, even 1 3/4 to 3 inches. Other spotted frog in Ohio, but his spots are a little more squared off. So you can see they're not as rounded, and his run literally in 2 parallel lines down their back. Whereas a leopard frog is just kind of scattered all over. The pickerel frog has 2 parallel lines of spots running right down his back. They do, if you notice right there where his kind of back leg attaches to his body, there's a little spot of yellow. So usually when you see bright colors on an animal, it means they're toxic. So they do think that pickerel frogs might be slightly toxic. So he has that little flash of color right there inside he's got a little bit in his front leg too. So they think that potentially when predators come up, he may be flashing his legs at them to show that he's got bright colors, which means that he is toxic and they should not eat him for breakfast. So that's kind of a cool thing about the pickerel frog. They like the slow moving water, damp areas with low plants, maybe streams, swamps, and meadows, but a little bit different. They can't handle like the salt water like the leopard frogs can. Sound wise, we kind of think that one sounds like maybe if you're squeaking on a balloon, like if you have a balloon like as a kid and you rub your thumb on it and it kind of makes that squeaking sound. Or I think it kind of sounds like if you're taking Velcro and pulling it apart very, very slowly. That's kind of what it reminds me of. But that's the pickerel frog. So for those of you that have been out to the vernal pools, you might have heard this guy already this year. So this is the wood frog. They're one of the coolest little frogs. They're small, only about 1 3/8 inches to 3 1/4 inches. I don't know if I've ever seen a wood frog quite that large. But they are our smallest little vernal pool, or one of our small little vernal pool guys. Yeah, yeah. So just like the wood frog you showed in your picture there, perfect. Um, so they're really neat. They do have that dark mask across their eyes and then a white lip liner, if you will, across their mouth. And that's their kind of identifying marks, is that little bandit mask that they've got. Here's why they're one of the coolest frogs. They are the only North American frog that is found north of the Arctic Circle. Found north of the Arctic Circle, where the ice is, where the plants are, or where no plants really grow, and all of the ices and all of that. Oh, I see a shout out to Christina from the zoo. Yeah. Thanks, Bryce. Yeah, Christina's amazing. She works with me very closely with Frog Watch and stuff. So, yeah, absolutely. You can reach out and help coordinate and all of that. So, I'd love to hear from you. And like I said, I love working with Christina. But they are the only North American frog found north of the Arctic Circle, which means these guys can freeze. So, when they go into hibernation for the winter, they don't just go to sleep. They actually freeze into little frog popsicles because they have special liquid in their bodies, in their cells, that allows them to freeze. And they are being studied because of that for organ transplant use. Because there's a thought that if we could freeze organs, they could last longer and we could get them farther to the people who might need them. So I think that's a really cool study that's being done. But basically, they have a lot of sugars and urates, which is urine, in their body, that when the water in their cells freeze, rather than forming jagged crystals like water does, sugars and urates cause those crystals to be rounded so it doesn't blow out all of their cells. In us, if we start freezing, the water in our cells freezes in jagged edges, it blows out our cells and causes death, aka frostbite, in us. Since their cells don't burst because the crystals don't form jaggedly, they can freeze. And then every spring, when it gets warm enough, they thaw out and they go about their little froggy lives, which I think is so cool. So they do mate late February to early April. They are out now. They are out calling and finding their mates and finding those vernal pools. They will literally mate underneath the ice in the vernal pools. Oh yeah, that's a really good wood frog picture there too. Cool. I love to see pictures of them. But they're the most terrestrial of our frog species, and they like woodlands, like vernal pools, and not so much ponds. But I always think of these guys, the way I can remember their call is they do sound like a bunch of quacking ducks. And if you know your birds in Ohio, you know we have wood ducks. Well, they're a wood frog that quacks like a duck. So if that helps you remember what they sound like. So our next section are our tree frogs. So we have 6 there too. We have our cricket frogs, so the Blanchard or the eastern cricket frog. We have our chorus frogs, a western chorus frog, a mountain chorus frog, and a northern spring peeper. We have the Hyla species, which are our gray tree frog and our Cope's gray tree frog. Basically, your tree frogs are the ones that climb trees. They have a very skinny little waist with long, thin limbs so they can climb those trees. They have big toe pads that allow them to stick, and they do have the ability to climb. So that's how you can kind of tell if you're looking at tree frogs. They kind of, when they're stretched out, look like little aliens, to be honest, because they have very, very skinny little frogs. So our first one all right, that is our gray tree frog. That is the most common frog in Ohio. They're 1 1/4 to 2 1/2 inches, so they're little. because, if you're going to haul all the way up a tree, you can't be very big. They are our only frog that has the ability to change color. They change from green to gray and can be anywhere in between. So the little guy there is kind of camouflaging with the bark. He looks gray. Most of the time when I get pictures of them, they are green and they are stuck to people's windows and ponds and the sides, or pools and the sides of their houses. There are two different kinds of gray tree frog that are identical in appearance, the gray tree frog and the Cope's gray tree frog. The difference is their call. So if you listen, the gray tree frog has a very short little trill, just a little brrr, brrr kind of sound. If you are really good and you record it and you know the exact temperature that trill is happening at, and you count how many trills happen per second, that will tell you which gray tree frog you're listening to. Or you can do a blood test. They have a different amount of chromosomes. They are very hard to tell apart. Very lucky for us, we don't have any Cope's gray tree frogs in this part of Ohio. We only have the gray tree frog. They do start mating in late April through late July, and they are going to be in the trees or shrubs around permanent water. They do breed in ponds, but they are going to be calling potentially a little higher, more at ear height, because they are tree frogs. But most common little frog in Ohio has a real short little trill. So there's the Cope's gray tree frog. So you can see the color change because they color change the same way. They are identical to look at, but as it says, can be identified by counting chromosomes or measuring their red blood cells. Sounds like a good Friday evening to me. And then you can also distinguish their calls by their trill rates. Apparently the Cope's is faster, a little raspier. They sound pretty identical to me. Their mating season's the same time. They're the same size, and they breed in the same places. Only difference are their chromosomes, their red blood cells, and how fast they trill in their call. So luckily, no Copes live in this part of Ohio. Yay! So that's the mountain chorus frog. Also don't have these in this part of Ohio. They're down south, closer to the mountains. So they have a little bit different call than our next frog, which I'm assuming will be our western chorus frog, which we do have here in our part of Ohio. But these guys have a wide stripe on their back that goes from their shoulder to the groin area. And almost touch to form an X, but not quite, because there's another frog who does have an X on his back. And then he's got another dark stripe on his nose that goes up through his eye and down the side of his body. So kind of like the bandit mask on the wood frog, but not quite. Also has white lip liner, and a little triangle there between his eyes. He's going to be mating around mid-March through early June. And he likes the forested hillsides around springs and seeps. Like I said, we don't have the right habitat here for them, so we don't have mountain chorus frogs in this part of Ohio. But we do have the next guy. Oh. Apparently I misread and I thought the chorus frog was next. This is actually my favorite of our frogs. This is the northern spring peeper. This is always the frog that we tell people, even if you don't think you know a frog call, you know a frog call. Because if you go out in the spring, you know this sound. And that is the spring peeper. They peep. That's what their sound is. They are real small, 3/4 to 1.5 inches, and they are identified by the full X on its back. So spring peepers have an X that starts behind each of their eyes and then ends kind of down on their hips. So they have a big X across their back. They can be different colors. They don't change colors, but they can be different colors, but they always have an X. And they are one of the first signs of spring, which is why they're one of my favorites. They do breed starting now all the way through late May. A lot of times these guys drown out the other frogs in the vernal pools, including the wood frogs, because the wood frogs are so quiet. The peepers will drown them out. They can be deafening if you get into a full chorus of spring peepers. They like vernal pools, and then they retreat into the woods for the rest of the summer. Like I said, one of my favorite little guys. Their calls pack a huge punch coming out of that little tiny body. All right, our next one. So that's our chorus frog that we have here in Northeast Ohio. 3/4 to 1.5 inches. easily very confused with the spring peeper because they're similar in size, breed at the same time, and in the same places. But whereas the spring peeper has that X on its back, the chorus frog has 3 racing stripes. So you can see the one that starts between his nose and kind of goes down, and then one behind each eye. He's got 3 racing stripes down his back. Starts breeding now through early May. They tend to be marshes, swamps, open forests, fields. That's fair. Occasionally ponds, but what they do is they come in, breed, and then they run away and they burrow into the mud and they avoid summer. Some summers I would really like to do that as well, but that's what they like to do. But their call, rather than peeping or trilling, we compare it to the sound of a comb. So running your thumb up and down an old plastic comb is kind of what we say the chorus frog sounds like. So that's our cricket frog here in Ohio. It's the only frog that has warts. So remember I said not all the rules are true. He has a white belly. He's got that triangle that's in between his eyes. He actually has a little bit of an overbite, so he's kind of a nerdy, cute little guy with his top jaw sticks out past his bottom jaw. His mating season is early May through early August. They aren't super common here in Northeast Ohio, even though there are some indicators that they might be moving this way, because where they live, they like to be sandy with not a whole lot of vegetation. They really like flooded agricultural fields. If you're familiar with the western part of Ohio, we have a lot of those. They like depressions and ditches. But there is some indication they're moving this way, but I think they sound a lot like banging together 2 marbles or 2 ball bearings. They make that clicking sound. And it actually speeds up and gets faster as they start running out of air. So they start out slower, and then as they're pushing to get all the last air out of their little lungs, they get a little bit faster and a little higher pitched. So you can tell the difference between a bug and them because bugs always stay steady. Whereas the cricket frogs, they have to stop and breathe, and you can tell the difference in their breathing as they're calling. All right, I think we're going to move on to our next type, our toads. So American toad, Fowler's toad, thick, dry, warty skin. They have those big glands on their shoulders. That's where the toxin is, the bufotoxin that they carry. They're very stout-bodied. They move in those little hops. They live on the ground. They're the ones in your yard. There's the ones in your gardens. And we have 2 toads in Ohio. So they're American toad, most common toad, 2 to 4 inches. They lay their eggs in those long strings that I showed you. They have American toads, if you're picking one up and you're looking at it, if you look at the spots that they have on their bodies, if they have 1 or 2 warts in their spots, it's an American toad. If they have 3 or more, it's a Fowler's toad, which is our other toad. So if you're feeling like counting warts on a toad, that's how you can kind of tell them apart. Their calls are also different. Toads are explosive breeders who will breed in anything. If there is wetness or water there, it could be a tire rut. It could be a tire laying on its side. It could be a pond or like a goldfish pond in your backyard. Toads are not particular. If there is water there, they will breed there. So they can be found just about anywhere that there is good moisture and insects for them year round and a spot for them to breed anytime early April through June. But they have that trill, so they're kind of like a gray tree frog, but their trill goes much, much longer. I always think that it sounds like they're going to run out of air because their trill just goes on and on and on and on. So that's the American toad. Our next toad That is our Fowler's toad. So I think a lot of times the books compare him to like a sheep bleating. I think he sounds like a screaming child. Or some people talk about how nasal they are. So like if you pinch your nose and scream, how nasal they sound when they're screaming. So they're very similar looking, but if you look at his spots, you can see he's got three or more warts in every one of his spots. He can crossbreed with American toads, but then they're sterile. They can't breed past that stage. So part of the reason that they have different sounding calls and that they live in different areas is so they don't crossbreed is the goal. They also like to burrow a lot more, so they actually like sandier soil. Whereas a lot of this part of Ohio is very heavy clay soil. They like the sandier areas that you find near marshes, maybe even your backyard if you've got, altered the soil kind of thing, temporary rain pools. They're a little choosier than what the American toad is. So they're not quite as common, but they are still here in Ohio. So kind of a cool little guy with his little nasal yell that he does. Now we're going to move on to our last grouping of frogs that we have in Ohio, including our Ohio species of concern. And that is our Peleobottidae, our spadefoot. So he's got large, smooth skin. He's smooth skinned with large eyes, and his pupils go the different direction than most other frogs. His are elliptical shaped, whereas most of them are kind of around. And he's got the reason he's called a spadefoot is he actually has a big spade on the back of each foot for digging. So we'll let you hear him and see what he looks like. So that's the spadefoot. They just sound weird. We don't have them in this part of Ohio. They're down south. They have those weird looking little pupils. I think they're pretty cute little frogs. They're a little different than the rest of ours, but they do have that spade on their back feet. And that's kind of how you can identify them. Their mating season is tied to the rains. So sometime April through August, but you do have to have a good rainstorm for them to come out. And their habitat is maybe some forested areas, but mostly fields and valleys that have loose sandy soil. I mean, if you're a frog that digs, you want sandy soil, you don't want clay. So he's going to be where the sandy soil is down farther south in the state. And they are our state endangered frog. So kind of cool. Now, our last slide before we wrap up has to do with actually getting to hear what it might sound like if you go out and do frog watch some night. So if you guys are good with your frogs, I want you to listen carefully. There are 4 frogs calling in this little recording. I want you to see if you can identify the 4 frogs that are calling. So let's see what you guys can do. I think I have to click it. So did anybody hear? What did you guys hear? There were 4 different frogs there. One of the frogs is the frog that's in the picture, which was sent by one of our volunteers to us. All right, let's check the chat. Let's see if you guys got them. How good you are. Peepers, definitely. They're always front and center. Was a bullfrog in there calling. Yep. 2 more. See if you guys can get them. The frog in the picture is green there, but sometimes he's gray. The gray tree frog, yep, that was another one that was calling in there. There was one other frog, he only called once or twice. He was real quiet down at the bottom. Might have sounded like he was playing the banjo. Yep, the green frog. Very good. Yep, just like Kermit. Kermit is green and he plays the banjo. Perfect. Great job. You guys got all 4. And that is a gray tree frog. There you go. Look at that. That is a gray tree frog that is in that flower that is currently green. And that is usually how I get pictures of them sent to me. So a lot of times people are like, what is this? I'm like, oh, that's a gray tree frog. They look like little blobs when a lot of people take pictures of them. But that is the end of my presentation. So I have here my email, the Frog Watch email. You are welcome to contact me if you're interested in going further with Frog Watch, or if you have any frog questions or pictures you want to share, anything like that. But I want to open the floor up if you guys have any last questions before we wrap up for the night. So I'll stop screen sharing and you can see my lovely video.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, no
Anybody have any
problem.
last minute questions?
That's a good question, Elise. So, yeah, they do recommend that you don't handle a lot of frogs and toads unless you've washed your hands. So like recently wash your hands in plain water, is a good one. Or like if I know if I'm like at a wetland or something, I will rinse my hands really good in the water of the wetland itself, which sounds kind of gross, but it will wash off anything that I might have on my hands so then I can handle the salamander or the frogs or things like that. You just want to make sure your hands are fairly clean of any kind of, you don't want to do it if you got sunscreen on or put moisturizer on recently. And you want to make sure your hands are wet so you don't tear their little delicate skin or anything. But usually, if I kind of can rub it around in the area they're in, then I will still pick them up. And especially if I'm moving them out of the way of something dangerous, I mean, I'd rather move them away and give them a chance than, something bad happening to them. If you want, Christine, I see you asked about hearing all the calls again with their names. If you want to shoot me an email, I can actually send you recordings of all of the frogs in an email, and I can attach them that way because I want to make sure we honor everybody's time tonight. So, but yeah, Christine, if you take that email and shoot me an email, I can send you recordings of all the frogs. And there's a little bit of information at the beginning of each of the recordings. It's from a CD by Ohio Biological Survey. So it tells you what kind of frog they are and information about them, and then it does their calls.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Carrie. And Carrie, if I'm not mistaken, you do the Frog Watch training. Isn't it more in January or something?
We do, but I do record the training too. So if anybody's interested in participating in Frog Watch this year, I can send the recordings of the trainings out. And a lot of the training is what we did, but the total training is like 3 hours. So there's more information in it than what we went over tonight.
Wonderful, Carrie. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah,
For
thank
those
you.
Wild Ones members, we've been talking about Carrie about possibly doing some other activities related, like I think Carrie mentioned possibly totem boats and
Yep.
possibly doing more with Frog Watch. So more to come. All right,
Yeah.
Carrie. Well, thank you again for
Yeah.
coming.
Thank you very much.
All right, let me share my screen to finish up here. All right. So now that we're getting into spring, I just want to remind everyone, if you haven't already, or you want to update your photos, please make sure you join the Northeast Ohio Habitat Corridor. And keep in mind, this is not even just for your own houses and gardens. This can be for your community gardens, as long as it has native plants, or I should say at least 3 native plants. That's all you need to start and get on the map. And it really helps people to see the different stages that everyone starts at, and they don't feel like, oh, it has to be this complete garden. It doesn't matter. It could be a pile of dirt and 3 native plants. It's about progress, not perfection. And so for those of you that are on the map already, once spring is in bloom or early summer, that's a great time to update your photos because we do always love to see everyone's progress. Also, I hope you guys consider becoming a member. It just helps keep our activities free and open to the public. Plus, it is tax deductible. So if you go to our Wild Ones chapter, and let me just copy this for you guys. I just put the link in the chat. But like I said, I hope you guys do consider becoming a member. And, just want to thank you guys all for joining. For those of you that are newer, we are on social media, so you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram. We put a lot of educational posts, little videos, things like that. We also have a YouTube channel with probably now over, I wouldn't be surprised if it's well over 50 different types of videos. So lots of cool educational topics there. We're obviously now working with Brunswick Area Television. So look for that Spring Ephemerals, one that will probably be airing in about a week or so. And we're also on LinkedIn. But should any of you guys have any questions, I'll stay behind to answer what I can with regards to Wild Ones or some of our upcoming events. But thank you again for your guys' time. Have a wonderful day.